When my nephew Ion knocked on my door that rainy evening, I could tell something inside him had already broken. He was only 22, but his eyes carried the heaviness of someone much older, someone who had made a mistake and was terrified of its consequences. I welcomed him in without questions, letting him sit on the old brown couch in my living room while I made tea, the way my mother used to do whenever any of us felt lost. The rain tapped softly against the windows, and the silence between us felt fragile, as if even a small word could shatter it. When I finally placed the cup in his trembling hands, he looked at me with eyes full of guilt and whispered, "Uncle, I have done something terrible." Ion had always been the calmest among my sister's children. Responsible, respectful, deeply attached to his family, especially to his wife, Hira. They had married young, but theirs was a love built on friendship and patience. I still remembered their wedding day, how he had looked at her not with pride, but with gratitude, as if he already understood that love was not something to possess, but something to protect. So when he said he had done something terrible, my heart tightened. I feared illness, debt, or some sudden fight. I did not expect what came next. "I betrayed her," he said, and the words seemed to burn his tongue. Not physically, but in my heart. And maybe that is worse. His confession was not dramatic. There were no excuses in his tone, only deep regret. He told me that over the past few months, while struggling at work and feeling inadequate about his income, he had grown distant from Hira. She had recently started teaching at a local school, and her confidence and success were growing. Instead of feeling proud, Ion felt small. He never told her about his insecurity. Instead, he buried it. And in that silence, a crack formed. At his office, a colleague had begun praising him, encouraging him, noticing his efforts in ways he felt Hira had stopped doing. The colleague's words were harmless at first, just appreciation and casual conversations during lunch breaks. But Ion admitted that he started waiting for those conversations. He began sharing thoughts he should have shared with his wife. He began hiding messages. There was no physical affair, no secret meetings beyond work hours, but there was an emotional shift. He knew his heart was leaning somewhere it did not belong. "I didn't touch her," he said firmly, as if trying to defend himself before a judge. "But I allowed my heart to seek comfort outside my marriage. Isn't that infidelity too?" I looked at him carefully. In his shame, I saw something rare: honesty. Many people justify emotional betrayal because there are no visible scars. But the heart knows. The conscience knows. Asked him what made him come to me instead of hiding it forever. He lowered his head and said, "Because Hira still trusts me completely. She tells me everything. She prays for me every day. And when I look at her, I feel like a thief standing in my own home." The rain outside grew heavier, almost as if the sky itself felt the weight of his confession. I told him something my late father once told me. Mistakes grow in darkness, but shrink in the light. The fact that he recognized his wrongdoing before it destroyed his marriage meant his heart was still alive. But the real question was not whether he had sinned. The question was what he would do next. He feared losing Hira. He feared breaking her trust more than anything else. "If I tell her, she will never look at me the same way again," he said. "But if I stay silent, I will never look at myself the same way again." That was the true battle. Not between him and Hira, but between his guilt and his courage. Over the next hour, we spoke about love. Not the romantic kind shown in movies, but the quiet love built through shared meals, unpaid bills, small sacrifices, and whispered prayers at night. I reminded him how Hira had supported him when his business idea failed last year. How she had sold her jewelry without telling anyone so he wouldn't feel embarrassed asking for help. Love like that is not fragile. It bends, but it does not break easily. However, it demands respect. Ion's voice cracked when he said he felt unworthy of her. "She deserves someone stronger," he murmured. I gently told him that strength is not the absence of weakness. Strength is admitting weakness before it turns into destruction. Real infidelity is not just about physical betrayal. It begins the moment we stop protecting the emotional boundaries of our relationship. But redemption begins the moment we choose honesty over comfort. 2 days later, Ayan did something that changed everything. He asked Hira to sit with him after dinner. He told her he needed to confess something, and though his hands shook, he did not hide behind vague words. He told her about his insecurity, his emotional dependence on someone else's praise, and how he had allowed that connection to grow in a way that disrespected their marriage. He did not blame her busy schedule. He did not blame his colleague. He blamed himself. When he told me what happened next, I felt my own throat tighten. Hira did not scream. She did not accuse. She cried quietly. Her tears were not loud, but they carried the weight of broken trust. "Why didn't you tell me you felt small?" she asked him. "I never wanted to outshine you. I wanted to walk beside you." Her pain was not about another woman. It was about being excluded from his struggles. For days, their home felt unfamiliar. Silence replaced their usual laughter. But unlike many couples who allow pride to widen the gap, they chose something different. They chose conversation. They spoke about expectations, about pressure, about how comparison can poison even the purest love. Hira admitted that she had been so focused on supporting the household financially that she had overlooked his need for emotional reassurance. Ayan promised to rebuild her trust not with promises, but with consistent actions. He changed his work boundaries, limited unnecessary conversations, and made transparency a priority. Trust does not return overnight. It grows slowly, like a fragile plant that needs daily care. There were moments when Hira's eyes filled with doubt, and instead of becoming defensive, Ayan responded with patience. He understood that healing required humility. Months passed, and gradually, warmth returned to their home. Not because the wound was forgotten, but because it was treated with honesty and effort. One evening, nearly a year later, they visited me again. This time they came together. Hira's hand rested comfortably in Ayan's, and there was a quiet strength between them. Over dinner, she surprised me by saying, "That painful chapter saved our marriage." I looked at her, confused. She smiled softly and explained that before the confession, they had been drifting apart without realizing it. His mistake forced them to confront unspoken insecurities. It forced them to choose each other again, not out of habit, but out of intention. Ayan added that true infidelity was not the emotional mistake he made. It would have been continuing the deception. "Love is not about never falling," he said thoughtfully. "It's about refusing to stay down." I saw in him a maturity that had not existed before that rainy evening. Pain had shaped him, but it had not hardened him. It had humbled him. As I watched them leave that night, I reflected on how easily relationships can be damaged, not only by grand betrayals, but by small emotional distances left unattended. Infidelity does not begin in secret meetings. It begins in silent comparisons, in withheld confessions, in seeking validation outside instead of strengthening the bond inside. But I also learned something equally powerful. Forgiveness is not weakness. It is courage wrapped in compassion. Ayan's secret could have destroyed his marriage. Instead, because he chose honesty before exposure, it became a turning point. Their love was no longer naive. It was tested. And tested love, when nurtured with respect and patience, becomes unbreakable. Today, whenever someone speaks casually about emotional attachments outside marriage, I remember that rainy evening and my nephew's trembling voice. I remember how close he came to losing something priceless, not because he stopped loving his wife, but because he stopped sharing his fears with her. Love cannot survive in competition. It survives in communication. It survives in humility. The moral of their story is simple yet profound. Relationships are not destroyed by a single mistake. They are destroyed by the refusal to admit one. True loyalty is not just physical faithfulness, but emotional responsibility. When we guard our hearts, speak our insecurities, and choose honesty over ego, we protect the people who trust us most. And when forgiveness meets sincere repentance, even a painful confession can become the foundation of a stronger, deeper love.